Hello, my name is Roger Claxton and welcome to this series of bite-sized talks entitled Poor on the Moor. The talks are in segments and based on the records in the Widecombe archive and the project that commenced in 2011 to digitise and catalogue them. The talks are based on the contents of the recently published book Welfare in Widecombe 1700 to 1900, written by me. You can get a copy through our website widecombe-in-the-moor.com/welfare and various other outlets. There are also e-book versions available. This is the fifth segment of the Poor on the Moor series of talks and explores how the poor rate money was spent, primarily but not exclusively for the relief of the poor. Money raised as poor rate was spent on direct help to the poor. Both cash payments were made as well as in-kind payments such as clothing. Outgoings also went towards legal matters related to upholding the poor laws and various other commitments. The example is from the overseer's accounts for 1734 and shows Walter Schillerbeer's bill for shoes. We can see that generally speaking a decent pair of shoes was obviously important but also quite expensive. Probably varied according to size. Men's shoes look as if they're more expensive than women's shoes, and so on. This next example, also from 1734, is for clothing, kitting out the needy. And here's the tailor's bill. I'll just translate or transcribe just a few lines of this. So for making a verst and breeches for Joseph Aptor, 1 and 6pence, for making a coat for his wife, 4pence, and for making an inner waistcoat for her, 3pence, and so on. This probably is the making only and doesn't include the cloth, which will be a separate bill. But quite interesting to go through it. Moving on to our next example, most of the money went as monetary payments and pensioners were normally listed first. So here we can see the second month's pay for 1805 and there's a series of payments: Isaac Brooking 14 shillings, John Bovey 10 shillings, Rebecca Brooke 10 and 6. These first entries are most probably, and I think from studying the overseer's accounts we can deduce that these are all regular payments and payments to the elderly. The payments will vary quite a lot sometimes, like John Lee's getting £1 4 shillings. That could be because he's getting pay for more than 1 month or something like that. Perhaps he was they couldn't find him last month or something. They don't all live let's say in the church house. They can live out in the community. Example, here are more payments, and this time made, in the main at least, to a BC or a base or bastard child. So there's a payment to Joan White of 8 shillings, a payment to Mary Coker's base child of 4 shillings, Jane Coker's base child 4 shillings, and so on. And Leaming's base child at Dunstan gets 6 shillings. Never too sure why the amounts vary. Maybe because she's at Dunstan it costs her more, I don't know. It's just impossible to tell from the church wardens and overseers' accounts. And there's also an example here of an in-need payment, which we think is a sort of one-off payment to somebody who has a particular need at that time. Moving on to the next example, showing how varied the outgoings were. So here we can see I'll take you through some of these. For a journey to the doctor for Elizabeth Potter's child, 1 shilling. So they paid for medical provision. Paid Joan French when at justice, 4 shillings. Paid for the summons and for 3 weeks' pay. So Joan French obviously got into trouble, and they had to deal with her in one way or another and pay for her costs. We move on now. Another journey to the doctor, this time for Anne Lehman. And then poor old Elizabeth Potter's child, who you can see at the top here, there was a visit to the doctor for him or her. So for a burying suit, they paid for a burying suit for Elizabeth Potter's child for 2 shillings. They paid the minister for dealing with the funeral, 2 and 6pence. For laying forth the body of the child, 3 shillings. For making the grave, 1 shilling. Expenses of ye burial, 2 and 6pence. And for candles and soap, 10pence, halfpenny. So again, interesting. The costs of a burial were quite high and mounted up as you added all of these little bits and pieces together. I'm concerned with spending the poor rate on various sort of sundry expenses, so in particular in this case legal expenses. And here we can see a receipt from a little bit later in the period. It's from Plympton, a solicitor presumably in Plympton, so it's probably to do with a removal order, which we will cover in a later segment. And I'll just read to you what it says. In Ray Barnett and family, Plymouth, March 1847, received of the churchwardens and overseers of the parish of Widecombe-in-the-moor by payment of Robert Tucker, Esquire. He was the Ashburton solicitor who acted for the overseers and churchwardens in most cases. The sum of £29, 8 shillings and 7pence being the amount of our taxed costs on the appeal of this special case before the Court of Queen's Bench. £29, 8 shillings and 7pence, quite a lot of money when you compare it to some of the other figures that have been in previous examples. And here's another example. Again, I'll just pick up a particular aspect of this. For summons for ye inmates, 6pence. Paid ye justices clerk concerning taking account of ye poor last year. And for journey for 2 overseers to justice about ye same and other parish affairs. So this was probably to do with perhaps a regular check-up of the inmates and whether they really should be there. I imagine that's what it's about, and the overseers have to go and explain and justify why they're there. And also at the bottom here we can see a payment of 3 county rates, £8 and 10.5 So again, quite a considerable sum of money being spent, but this time payable to the county as the county rate, and that comes out of the poor rate. Another particularly unusual expense is the fact that the killing of foxes, which were at that time counted as vermin, bounty payment was made for the killing of foxes, and for some reason this payment came out of the poor rate. So here we see again there's 3 county rates and a half, quite a considerable sum of money. John Warren, 6 shillings, and then for killing a fox, I presume it's also John Warren, it may be somebody else, 10 shillings. So a killing of a fox receives 10 shillings, quite a sum of money. And then in this next example, very similar, but this time paid William Shyke for killing 3 young foxes. This time he gets 15 shillings, i.e. 5 shillings per young fox. So that's the end of segment 5. Information on how the poor rate was spent. Obviously it's just merely scratching the surface of the vast quantity of detail in the overseer's accounts, but probably enough for you for now. So thank you very much for listening, and please stay for the next segment. Thanks very much.
They'll lift me up and lay me down gently down, till I reach consecrated ground, along the old rich way. On 6 strong shoulders I will sway.